different. So in a sense, I would say yes, in the short term we can complain about it, but in the long term it's us who are basically contributing to the part of that problem. Thank you.
Can I say one? Yeah, I want just to say something on the center-periphery model, which has to be nuanced according to the country size. For example, we have a European Economic Area country that's always outside the radar screen, but is in no statistics normally, and that country is Liechtenstein. And this is one of the most developed and richest country, and is the most industrialized country in the world. It has a 40% share of manufacturing in GDP, but it's so small, it didn't have a statistical office a few years ago, and now it has only 6 people in the statistical office, so it doesn't participate normally in surveys. There are no data, because the country has only 37,000 inhabitants. And it's certainly a center country, one of the richest countries in the world. And then we have a country like Brazil, which you may count as periphery or semi-periphery, but it has 200 million inhabitants and a powerful statistical system, and it has something like an innovation survey, which is as good as the European innovation surveys. And for example, in 2012, Greece didn't participate in the community innovation survey because it didn't have the money, it had other problems. So even European countries can be in the periphery, and even in South America you can have well-performing statistical systems. And if you look at the website of the Mexican Statistical Institute, we see very good geographic information systems. We see for Brazil data that sometimes don't exist in Europe. So I think the center-periphery model is too simple. It is also the country size.
Thanks. I think we do have the starting of a debate here. I will just say something, because I don't quite agree, so I'll say it, and then I'll open it again to the public. I think your suggestion is that the problem with the periphery seems to be basically one of data availability. And if just the data availability is there, then we're making great progress. I think one of the issues in the Slavo direction is that the problem with indicators is a problem of the use we make of these indicators. And in that, I have some sort of concerns, because you we use indicators to monitor. So yeah, okay, yeah. But what do you do with the monitoring? That's the key issue. It's not only monitoring, you know, it's like saying that evaluation has a learning function. That's saying nothing. Of course you learn by looking at that evaluation. What the issue is, what do you use this learning for? And in the use of indicators, that's where the problem appears. It's not in the monitoring, it's in the use we do of the monitoring, I think. And having said that, I don't want to enter into debate with you, although I think I've been a bit naughty because I've just said something and they open to the public. But oh, you wanted to say something? Are you open? No. Yeah, okay, let's go. It was a question there for half an hour. Yes, so let's be there.
May I start? Yes. Thank you. My name is Henk Moed. I am active in the field now for 35 years or so. I worked for 30 years with the CWTS in Leiden. I want to make a statement about how to reduce the power of numbers, if you don't mind. Yes, I want to make a statement on how to reduce the power of numbers, which seems to be very important indeed. Now, perhaps it's a little bit simplistic because I don't have much time. But in any case, say 30, 40 years ago, we had a situation in which we had a few indicators, but we also had a layer, a group of experts who were between the indicators and the users. And very specifically, those were librarians or they were scientometricians. Now, those times will never come back. They are completely changed. We have now an enormous proliferation of indicators. I picked up the term community. I think we should be realistic. I'm not even sure that there is a community of developers. There are many developers that we have never seen on this conference. So there's an enormous proliferation, and I think that what is also going on a little bit, and that is also a relic from the past, is that the indicators or the products, they are often considered by users as given from above, as something more or less finalized that you can accept or that you cannot accept, that you can use or you cannot use. Now, one approach is, of course, to define base principles, such as has been done in the Leiden Manifesto, and of course it makes sense. But I would like to bring to your attention another way we must think of, and that is we should facilitate users more to raise their own level of background knowledge and even hands-on experience with creating and interpreting indicators. So we should get rid of this idea that indicators are given from above and that you can either accept or reject them. And I think that what is needed, and this is what I want to propose now to you, and what is also technically feasible, are systems to compose and decompose, create and recreate indicator values, and also tools to analyze patterns in multifaceted data. And I want to give one example, and I know it's always risky to make examples, but one of the most important products now with a lot of impact are these so-called university rankings. But you should take a look at those rankings. They are basically, although I have a lot of respect for what has been achieved during the past 10 years, but they're quite one-dimensional, actually. They give a few aspects in parallel, but it is very difficult to get a comprehensive overview of the data that is in the system. Now, what could be useful, for instance, but again, it is an example. There are indicator systems that contain data on reputation and on citation impact. Now, reputation is normally based on surveys. People are asked to nominate universities they have ever heard of. And citations, that relates more to the short-term impact. I think it would be very useful if there were a system in which you can very simply make a scatter plot of reputation against citations. And if you do that, or if a user or a manager would do that, then he would be surprised about what he would see. And all these insights you cannot have with the current systems. And then you will see that it raises all kinds of questions, both about the reputation measures and about the citation measures themselves. Again, this is an example, and again, I use this example to illustrate that what we perhaps should do is give users, differentiated, you have different levels of course, more insight into how these indicators are constructed and give them the opportunity to, so to speak, play around a little bit with the data as well. I think that's the only way to continue. But of course, it is very important that the producers and also the owners of the data systems, they take their responsibility because they have, of course, a very active role to play as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very helpful, constructive. I think if there's any other comment on this one there, Jochen? Yes.
No? Yes. Okay. This self-reinforcing business sounded indeed a bit depressing, and I think in terms of solutions, my suggestion is rather poor because I'm a researcher. So the only solution I can suggest is more research. One could, of course, alternatively think about closing down the indicators conferences and not having the conferences anymore in order to slow down the whole business. But I don't think we would agree to that. What I was thinking about in terms of more research is, however, a bit of different research. And the whole conference, and particularly this panel, suggested actually three things to me. First, Johan Mouton this morning was very clear that the research needs to be extended into the processes our indicators are supposed to describe, that there is really a lack of knowledge about these processes. Second, several contributions to this conference suggested that the research needs to be extended into the consequences, the potential impacts the indicators have. Now, this exceeds the expertise of any indicator community, so there will be much interdisciplinary effort required here. But what I think we could do with the indicators research itself, we could be much more demanding of each other in demanding to include in presentations of indicator work the underlying assumptions about the system we are assuming to describe. So when some new indicator on research performance is offered, we should demand as a kind of quality standard for such presentations to at least publish the assumptions about research on which this indicator is built. We should also demand to lay open assumptions or thoughts at least on possible consequences of the application of these indicators. So this is something we could do to ourselves, and we might become more of a community when we do this, because we actually will be much better able to talk to each other about our indicators instead of just kindly listening to the 17th perfect indicator of this or that.
Very good. Thanks a lot. Any other questions, comments? These two. I'll take these two, then I'll give it to the table and we'll close. Yes.
I want to actually answer to Professor Hicks. I'm Valentin Bogorov, and I work at Thomson Reuters office in Moscow, in Russia. And it's about the Leiden Manifesto. Actually, I want to say that we are very thankful to you and to other authors of this manifesto. And let me explain why. We are producers of the data and producers of these indicators, the indicators based on the data. Now, the data and the indicators then inform the public policy. In our region, at least, about 10 years ago, nobody really used the indicators to measure science and technology and then to build public policies on the basis of that. Now, many countries do that, and many of them do that in a very uninformed way. So I can actually have a number of examples, some of which are very amusing, and others are very sad, about how the indicators are used mechanically, how they're used without really an understanding of what the data is behind them and what the societal impacts are. So we are very happy that now there is a policy document which we can refer to, which is the voice of wisdom, which calls to use the indicators responsibly, above all. So, thank you. And yes, we are actually in our region, we have translated it in the local languages, the Leiden Manifesto, and we suggest to the policymakers to use it in order to promote a more informed discussion of what indicators can be and how they can be used to actually achieve the goals to advance the science and to have positive societal impact.
Thank you. There was a final question down there, or comment. It's on your left.
Thank you. It seems to me that the conference has not only pointed out the power of numbers, but also the weakness of numbers. And I wonder if it may not be perhaps convenient to think that the eye of STI could be more for innovation and leaving indicators as a sort of common theme, but science, technology, and innovation, eventually introducing policy, but perhaps STI is already a brand. Thank you.
Funny you mentioned that, because in the governing board of ENIT yesterday, we were precisely discussing this, and I think we'll probably sneak it in exactly in the way you suggest. So you are not alone in thinking this way. I think I need about 15 minutes to wrap up the conference. So what I will do now is to give the word to the panel for some final remarks, if they wish, and then we'll go on into the closing of the conference. I think, yes, I think I will start now from left to right. So Diana?
Thank you very much. And I'm thinking for my Atlanta conference on science and innovation policy next year, October, in Atlanta. Maybe a good theme might be the power of numbers and the weakness of numbers. I like that. Thank you.
Well, I simply was thinking that is the problem the use of indicators, or is the problem the people within institutions using indicators? I cannot see indicators. There are people there. So my question is, no more indicators? No, never. We need indicators. But if we think of indicators as answers, what we need perhaps is better questions. And this is the future ahead, perhaps.
Richard.
Yes, a few things. First, worldwide spending on research and development is over 1,000 billion euro per year, of which about 300 billion euro in the European Union. Therefore, it's clear, and this is to a large extent, or 1/3 is public money, and public money is scarce. And it's clear that we have to use this money well. And a study has also shown that in the European Union countries, in the last decade, 62% of economic growth came from innovation. And so we spend a lot of money for research and development, and we have to make sure that this money triggers innovation and then economic growth. And another figure, over 1,000 billion euro per year are spent worldwide on higher education, of which 200 billion in the European Union countries. And again, this is mainly in the European Union public money. Therefore, it's clear that policymakers, managers want to increase, want to monitor what's going on, that this money is spent wisely, want to improve outputs, and therefore we need, of course, indicators like performance indicators, like bibliometrics. You can criticize them and you have to improve them, but they are unavoidable because there's so much spending here, 1,000 billion, and this spending has to be efficient. And we heard in one presentation that, for example, the number of publications in some disciplines in physics or something has doubled in the last 10 years. That's probably also a result of this increased monitoring, which has also sometimes negative effects, that everything is focused on certain quantitative outputs. So one thing, we can't avoid this measurement, we can't avoid, and also we are here researchers, we want to measure something with figures. Figures are important. Already Pythagoras said numbers rule the world, so this is not something new. This is there since more than 2,000 years. A problem I see is that the users, there are different users, where the researchers who use the numbers themselves and they want to have more numbers and more research. There are policymakers on different levels. High-level policymakers have little time. They cannot read footnotes. They cannot read the definitions of indicators. They want something very aggregate, very short, very condensed. And their numeracy skills are often not as good as you would like to have. And we see also a problem that media, for example, use the figures, and media like ranking, because then you have a number one that is a very simple information, and you have the worst performer, and media like to dramatize. Bad news is good news. Either the country is very bad, and then there's a news, or it's very good. And you see some perverse effects that we saw it also here, that everybody wants to be on the top. And everybody wants to be above average, which is not possible. And we saw, for example, Austria wants to be a top innovator country. We want to be among the innovation leaders, which are at the moment only 5 countries. Bulgaria wants to move from modest to moderate innovator. It would be funny if all the EU countries had the goal to be above average, which is not possible, but you see this sometimes. And everybody wants to be above average. And this focus on ranking is sometimes a problem, because how hard we ever try in the European Union, we will not see all the European countries being above EU average. And and then I see also the risk of some kind of data pollution. Sometimes we have even too many composite indicators. There's a lot of media attention to that. And for example, in 2003, Shanghai developed the Shanghai ranking. And we were surprised how much media attention it generated. And then other rankings came up, the higher education ranking now, the QS ranking, because this is all a lot of content for the media. Many people are involved in education. Many people have studied or have children who study. So for them, it's very interesting also with school assessments like PISA. This is a big media content, and this has grown and almost grown out of control, because if you have too many rankings, you have sometimes the paradox of 2 clocks. If you look on the left side, you have a clock showing it's 5 o'clock, then you are sure that it's 5 o'clock. If you have on the right side a clock that shows it's 6 o'clock, then you have 2 clocks with 2 different times, and you're not sure anymore what time it is. And this happens sometimes with the rankings. Recently, the Global Innovation Index was published, and then UK was much higher, and Belgium was much lower than in the European Innovation Scoreboard. And then colleagues came to me and said, what's happening? Should we trust the European Innovation Scoreboard or the Global Innovation Scoreboard? Why is the country? And I said, but look, one ranking has 82 indicators and the other has 25 indicators. It's natural that it's different. But so there's sometimes a risk that we do too much, and then it kind of creates data pollution and entropy, and people don't know anymore where we are, although we assess it all the time and we produce all kinds of rankings. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Slavo?
3 points. If there was some Martian listening this, he would be very much surprised. He said, these people live from indicators and they are continuously complaining about the limits and all of that. So he would be really puzzled with that. But the way as anything in life, it has its positive and negatives. You know, the range of data that we have today, I mean, there's a lot of that we should be happy about. You know, equally, what bothers me, that basically use of indicators is to a large extent also a reflection of increasing managerialism in all walks of life, including academy, and if you live in UK system, then you will know well, if you want to manage today one department, you don't have to know anything about the top area. It's all commodification, management by numbers, you know, kind of, that has its good sides in some sense, but it has a huge problems. And I think what we are unhappy is this neglect of the context. And I think it's also a reflection of our poor understanding in academy of the relationship between science, R&D, growth, welfare, sustainability. And I think that we are kind of getting out of the stage where we were obsessed with this idea of input, outputs, performance, you know, kind of. I think we are getting into the stage where we are understanding more that the context and processes matters. And I think that we will see in the future more of those indicators which will be not obsessed where you are on the ranking, but will show more the differences in context and processes, you know. So if things go in that direction, I think we will get a richer understanding, and that will also help us to understand this relationship. Partly it's a really failure of academics to explain this relationship. And that leads me to the final point, which is the suggestion that users should be also allowed to create their own matrices. Why it doesn't happen more? Because indicators are also deeply political issue. You know, if I control the metrics, I control my view of the world and my criteria, you know, kind of. So there is maybe today a situation where, and we are maybe ready to come to a situation like from the European Commission, because Richard is here, which would say, country A, we give you that money, but you choose your metrics on which you want to be evaluated. And that may generate actually much more insight and new things, and I think there is definitely a need for getting out of the boxes in which we often find ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Slavo. I think we've ended in the note of some good suggestions. Me, the pessimist, I never think anything is possible, and I've been proven wrong. I think we have got some practical, specific suggestions we could even try to put forward. And I would like to thank the panel and the participants in this final session of the conference. So in customary manner, I will just for the... And now, the end. Judith was telling me yesterday over dinner, say something, say something, say something. I said, no, I'm not going to give any dinner speech because tomorrow I'll speak quite a bit. So the end is going to be a long thing. I have here several pages. I am sorry about that. So I'm going to make my peace for not having said anything yesterday for dinner. So first, a bit of logistics. I don't know whether you watch the New Year's concert on TV every year, and they always say, now we have reached the end of the official program, but we will have 2 encores. So it's exactly the same. So now we have ended the reach of the official program, but we have 2 encores. And the 2 encores we're having is in the same room. In about 10-15 minutes, we'll have what we call a fringe session. It's a fringe session because it's a bit different, and it's open to the public. Anybody can come. It's not a conference event per se. But of course, being a Friday afternoon, and being where we are, quite away from the center of the town, and being in English, the public is us, right? And maybe somebody else who will come along, right? So what we will do is we will present a local initiative from Valencia. So it's a bit of peripheral initiative, if you want. It's a grassroots kind of movement, which is try to be research from INGENIO, taking action research kind of approach. That will be presented. There will be some movies and so on. And we will discuss what this action research is trying to do in this kind of peripheral situation. And we will reflect about things of how on earth you get indicators for that and how you monitor this. And there will be the pictures, and there will be a panel. Sandra Boni, who is from INGENIO, promoted this approach, will be participant. Ramon Marradas, which I see in the program says local activist. I'm being told he is the local activist. Ramon Marradas has been this morning in a parallel session, and according to the tweets, he was brilliant, right? Several tweets. So, there's good value, I guess. And then a local representative from the Platform for New Energy Model, and Heavy Vesuri, and guess what? Judith Sutz. Congratulations. So you really want to close it. So thanks to Judith again for at midnight you will still be in panels, don't worry. So I think it's going to be an interesting event. For those who, despite my efforts to convince you to stay here, decide that they have enough of panels and lectures and movies and seminars and indicators, there's going to be a cocktail outside in about 30 minutes. And when the session finishes, we'll have a bit of music. The music comes courtesy of the Berklee College of Music. I'm a music completely ignorant person, so I've gone to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia tells me this. BCM, Berklee College of Music, located in Boston, is the largest independent college of contemporary music in the world, known for the study of jazz and modern music. And then goes on with the description of the facilities they have that are very American, like, 25 buildings, a theater for 2,000 people, and I don't know what else. It's huge. And then tells us that Berklee alumnus have been awarded 256 Grammy Awards. So this is a good school, and it just happens